For a moment.
And with other Democratic AGs across this country to make sure that we would be ready to respond to any attempt to roll back our rights. So here we are. We've studied their platforms. We've identified certain possibilities, fact patterns. We've created contingency plans. So no matter what the next administration throws at us.
All right, so let's dive right into this situation with Trump demanding New York AG Letitia James to drop this case against him. It's pretty wild.
It is.
Especially right after his 2024 win.
Yeah. It's certainly interesting. I mean, with Trump demanding that New York AG Letitia James drop this civil fraud case against him and his family and his businesses, he's saying it's for national unity.
Right.
But it is an interesting move, especially considering everything that's been going on. I mean, Trump has had a pretty good run legally lately.
He has.
Yeah, wins with the special counsel cases at the federal level, and then even that Manhattan DA case wrapped up in his favor.
Yeah.
So he's got some momentum, it seems.
For sure. It seems like he's coming off a string of victories.
Right.
And you know what? We're actually working with some exclusive information here. A letter obtained by Fox News Digital that really lays out Trump's argument.
Okay.
So
now it's important to remember this New York case is civil, not criminal, meaning it's about financial penalties, not jail time. But we're talking a significant amount of money. Trump was already ordered to pay $454 million.
Wow.
Although he is appealing that judgment.
$454 million, even for someone like Trump, that's got to hurt.
Yeah.
But you are right, this isn't a criminal case. Can we spend just a minute talking about the differences between those two types of cases, just so everyone listening is clear?
Absolutely. In a criminal case, the burden of proof is much higher.
Yeah.
The prosecution has to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a very stringent standard. And the potential penalties are more severe as well. You're talking imprisonment, fines, all sorts of other restrictions.
So in Trump's case, if he were to lose this appeal, he wouldn't be facing any jail time because it's a civil case.
That is correct. In a civil case like this one, the burden of proof is lower. It's called preponderance of the evidence, meaning more likely than not. And the penalties are typically financial, just like this $454 million judgment against Trump.
Got it. So back to that appeal, what are the chances that he could actually overturn or reduce that judgment?
Well, from what we've seen so far, the judges on the appeals court, they seem to be open to revisiting the initial judgment. And, that's a key point of leverage for Trump right now.
And his lawyer is definitely using it. In this letter we talked about, his lawyer is arguing that these ongoing legal battles have become a flashpoint of national partisan division. Basically, he's saying it's dividing the country.
Yeah. And that argument does tap into something real that's been happening, this rise in political polarization that we've seen in recent years.
For sure.
So it raises the question, is this a genuine call for unity? Just a strategic move, or maybe some combination of both?
It's a good question. Can we just recap the specifics of this New York case for a second? What exactly are they accusing Trump and his businesses of?
Basically, the core of the case is that Trump and his businesses inflated the value of their assets to secure loans and insurance deals. So, we're talking golf courses, hotels, even his personal brand. Essentially, it's a type of financial fraud.
I see. And this isn't just speculation. There have already been some legal rulings, right?
Right. Earlier this year, Judge Arthur Engoron ruled that Trump and others involved in his businesses were liable for fraud.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah. But Trump's team is pushing back against these accusations. They're saying that Trump provided disclaimers and that banks did their own assessments. Basically, that everyone knew the rules of the game and that Trump wasn't trying to deceive anyone.
Right. Well, it is important to break down what those disclaimers actually mean. I mean, they're essentially statements that limit the responsibility of whoever's giving the information. They can caution against relying solely on those figures, but they have to be worded very specifically.
So it's not as simple as just saying, hey, I put a disclaimer in there, I'm off the hook.
Exactly. It's a lot more nuanced than that. James will likely argue that even with disclaimers, misrepresenting those values to gain a financial advantage is still fraud.
It's complicated.
Right.
We've got this legal back and forth, but then Trump's legal team is also trying to make a more emotional appeal. His lawyer is trying to paint him as this hero, this successful developer who rebuilt the New York skyline. They're going for this sense of, I don't know, maybe like civic pride.
It's definitely an interesting strategy appealing to those emotions. And, Trump's involvement in New York real estate does go way back.
It does, yeah. But is that whole rebuilt the skyline thing accurate? I mean, weren't there controversies surrounding some of his projects?
Yeah, there have been some. I mean, some people might view his developments as revitalizing parts of the city, but others will point to issues like the use of eminent domain to acquire properties, allegations of discriminatory housing practices, and even multiple bankruptcies.
Right. It's complicated. It seems like there are a lot of perspectives on his impact on the city. But back to the case. What do you think James is going to say to all of this? She's not just going to drop it.
Well, she's built a reputation on holding powerful people accountable, so it seems unlikely. She believes in upholding the law. Her office will likely argue that holding Trump accountable is crucial. It's about deterring future fraud and keeping public trust in the legal system.
It's a tough spot to be in.
It is. And, it's important to think about this idea of prosecutorial discretion.
Okay.
Prosecutors, they have the authority to decide what cases to pursue and how to handle them. They've got to balance all kinds of factors. Like how strong is the evidence? Is it in the public interest?
Right.
And do we even have the resources to do it?
Yeah.
So it's not just about guilt or innocence.
So James has to consider all these things, not just whether or not she thinks Trump did it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Does pursuing this case, even with all the challenges in the politics, does it actually serve the greater good?
It's a tough decision. So let's say she does decide to move forward. What could happen? What are the possible scenarios here?
Well, the most likely scenario is that this just keeps going through the courts.
Right.
Both sides going back and forth with appeals and all that legal maneuvering. It could take years.
Yeah.
I mean, it could go on throughout Trump's whole presidency.
So we're talking about this legal battle just dragging on with no clear winner.
Yeah, that's a real possibility. Appeals can get very complicated.
Definitely. And we can't forget what's at stake for both sides.
Absolutely. I mean, for Trump, this case has some serious financial risks.
Yeah.
That $454 million, if it's upheld, that's a huge blow even for him.
Yeah.
But it's more than just the money.
Right. It's his reputation, too. Being found liable for fraud, I mean, that could hurt his image, could make it harder to do business in the future.
Yeah.
Could even impact his ability to govern effectively if it's a constant distraction.
All valid concerns. And for James, this case is bigger than just winning. She wants to uphold the law and show that nobody's above it, not even the president. Right. It's a matter of principle.
It's a real clash of principles, and I'm sure the public is divided on this whole thing. This case seems to bring up those deep partisan tensions.
Yeah. This has become a real lightning rod. Trump supporters see it as a witch hunt, while his critics think it's a crucial step towards holding him accountable.
So no matter what happens legally, this is going to keep fueling division and debate.
That seems inevitable. It brings up these fundamental questions about fairness and accountability and just the balance of power.
It's complicated.
Yeah. And it's important to remember, at the heart of this are real people. People whose lives are being affected by this case.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's easy to get lost in the legal and political drama, but these are real people.
Exactly.
We're talking about Trump and his family facing so much scrutiny and pressure, their reputations, their personal lives. I mean, that can't be easy.
And think about Letitia James and her team, too.
Yeah.
They're under a lot of pressure as well. Accusations of bias, their every move is scrutinized. It takes a toll on them, too.
Yeah, it's a reminder that these legal battles have real-world consequences for everyone involved.
Absolutely. It's not just abstract concepts.
Yeah.
These are real people with families and emotions whose lives are being affected by this.
Well said. So as we keep following this story, let's try to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
It's easy to get lost in the legal stuff, but ultimately this is about people.
Absolutely.
And the impact it has on their lives.
Right. It's also a reminder that the legal system, even though it's supposed to be impartial, it's happening in a broader context.
And that context can get really messy, like we see with this case. This case really does seem to bring up a lot of these big issues,
That does.
Makes you think about what it all means for the future of our democracy.
Yeah. I mean, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
This whole thing really shows how important it is to uphold the rule of law.
Uh-huh.
I mean, regardless of political party.
Right.
If a president can just demand a case be dropped.
Right.
Even after he's elected.
Yeah.
Just for political convenience.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a slippery slope.
It feels like we could be heading towards a system where power and influence matter more than justice.
Yeah. That's the risk.
It is.
And that kind of system would erode trust in our institutions.
Right.
Really weaken the foundation of our democracy.
So what can we even do to protect our democracy when things are so politically charged?
It's tough. There's no
Yeah.
easy answer.
Right.
It's going to take all of us working together,
Yeah.
citizens, lawmakers, the media, everyone.
Yeah.
We have to hold our leaders accountable,
Ugh.
engage in dialogue, and not just retreat into echo chambers.
That's a tall order,
It is?
but we have to start somewhere.
Exactly. I mean, maybe this case, as unsettling as it is, could be a wake-up call.
Yeah.
It reminds us that our democracy isn't a spectator sport.
Right.
It takes participation and commitment to those shared values.
I think we just went from a deep dive to a deep think.
Ah.
This whole thing has me thinking about the big picture.
Well, that's the power of these deep dives, right?
Right.
It's not just about the information.
Yeah.
It's about making us think about these complex issues and look at things from different angles.
And sometimes it leaves us with more questions than answers.
Sometimes, yeah.
But that's all right.
It is.
Because those questions can spark curiosity and critical thinking.
Exactly.
Maybe even a little bit of hope.
I agree with that. So, as you keep thinking about all this,
Okay.
remember that this case is just one piece of a bigger puzzle.
Right.
It's up to all of us to decide how we want to shape the future.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this.
Okay.
What do you think is the most important takeaway from this deep dive? What questions are you left with? We'd love to hear your reflections. Until next time, keep diving deep and stay curious.